When we talk about aging, there's a deeply embedded narrative that most people have silently accepted. That the body simply breaks down with time, that muscles shrink, energy fades, and weakness is just part of getting older. And perhaps the most quietly accepted part of that story is this idea that muscle loss after 50 is inevitable, that it's some irreversible law of nature, one we can't do anything about. But the truth, and it is a truth we rarely hear, is that this isn't just aging, it's largely nutritionally driven. And that shift in understanding changes everything. Sarcopenia, the clinical name for age muscle loss, doesn't suddenly appear like a thief in the night once you hit your 50s. It's a slow, cumulative process. And more often than not, it starts much earlier than we think, even in our 30s. But we don't feel it right away. We're too busy. We're functional. Until one day we realize climbing stairs is harder. Our grip is weaker. We're losing strength without doing anything differently. That's the moment we usually look to protein or to exercise as the solution, but that's not where the real problem lies. You see, the muscle tissue in your body isn't just responding to movement or protein intake, it's responding to the quality of your internal environment. And this environment is shaped by the nutrients you give or don't give your body every single day. Think of your muscles as highly intelligent, energy-hungry systems. They are constantly assessing whether your body has the resources it needs to build, repair, and regenerate. And when those resources are absent, especially the ones we rarely talk about, like potassium, your muscles begin to break themselves down, not because they want to, but because they have no choice. This is where the deeper problem emerges. Many people over 50 eat diets that are technically sufficient in calories, but deeply deficient in micronutrients. The body doesn't age simply because it runs out of time. It ages faster when it runs out of the materials it needs to maintain itself. Potassium is one of those materials. And yet, despite being essential to muscle function, nerve signaling, and cellular energy, it's overlooked in most nutritional conversations. Why? Because it doesn't have a sexy brand behind it. There's no supplement hype train for potassium the way there is for collagen or whey protein. So what happens when the body doesn't get what it needs year after year? It starts making compromises. Your body is wise, but it's also pragmatic. If there's not enough potassium to support optimal muscle contraction or intracellular hydration, it begins reallocating resources. It conserves energy, slows down repair, and your muscles, which once responded to simple stimulation, begin to resist growth. You don't feel this happening overnight. It's a gradual silencing of your vitality. And because we're conditioned to see aging as decline, we accept it. We call it normal. But in truth, what we're really witnessing is a form of nutritional neglect playing out in slow motion. And here's the part that cuts deeper. This kind of muscle loss doesn't just affect your physical body. It changes your identity. Strength is not just a biological trait, it's psychological. When you lose the ability to move powerfully through space, to feel stable, capable, resilient, something in your sense of self begins to erode. You may still look fine in the mirror, but you know, you can feel the shift, and it's demoralizing, especially when you're doing everything right. That's why we have to stop looking at muscle health as a purely mechanical equation, calories in, exercise out, and start viewing it as a system of signals. The body is always communicating. Weakness is a signal. Fatigue is a signal. And when muscle begins to shrink, it's not just aging, it's a call for nourishment that's not being answered. When we ignore that call, we don't just accelerate physical aging, we internalize it, we start to believe we are less capable, less vital, less alive. But here's the empowering truth. Sarcopenia is not a sentence, it's a signal. And signals can be changed. When we begin to nourish the body, not just with macronutrients, but with the critical minerals like potassium that restore intracellular balance, everything shifts. The body remembers. Muscles begin to respond again. Energy returns. And that sense of strength, of inner stability, it comes back. And it's not just physical. It's deeply psychological, because the moment you begin to feel stronger, you begin to see aging not as a slow death, but as a new chapter, one where vitality is reclaimed not surrendered. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, well, I'm just getting older, stop and ask, is it really age? Or is it a body asking for what it hasn't received in years? Because strength isn't lost with time, it's lost with neglect. And the moment you choose to nourish it is the moment you begin to rebuild it. So let's get honest about something that might surprise you. When it comes to rebuilding muscle after 50, everyone's looking in the wrong direction. You walk into a health store and it's wall-to-wall protein, shakes, bars, powders, amino acids. The messaging is loud and clear. More protein equals more muscle. But what if I told you that the real missing link, the actual driver behind whether or not your muscles rebuild, isn't protein at all? It's a mineral. And not calcium, not magnesium, it's potassium. The one thing almost no one is talking about, and yet it's quietly behind nearly every function that allows your muscles to thrive. Now let's think about what muscles actually do. They contract, they expand, they recover, and ideally, they regenerate. But none of those things happen in isolation. They require electrical signals, fluid balance, enzyme activation, and a healthy exchange of nutrients across the cell membrane. That's where potassium steps in. Potassium isn't just some electrolyte you lose when you sweat. It is the primary intracellular mineral, meaning most of it lives inside your cells, particularly muscle cells, and it is essential for muscle contraction, nerve function, and cellular energy production. It is in every sense a master regulator. Here's the irony. We're swimming in conversations about macronutrients, how many grams of protein, carbs, and fat we should eat. But we're starving for micronutrient literacy, and potassium sits at the top of that forgotten list. Without enough potassium, your muscles don't respond properly to movement. They don't fire the way they should. They don't recover as fast, and they certainly don't grow. So the idea that we can simply load up on protein after a workout and expect the body to turn that into lean mass, it's incomplete. It's like trying to build a house with bricks but no mortar. Here's the part most people miss. Potassium is required to activate the enzymes that allow protein to be synthesized into muscle tissue. Without it, that protein you're obsessively consuming, it doesn't get metabolized efficiently. It floats through your system like a missed opportunity. That's the biochemical side. But the philosophical layer goes even deeper. Think about what it means to be strong in your 50s and beyond. Food. It's not just about aesthetics. It's about presence. It's about how you move through the world, how rooted and capable you feel in your own body. Potassium supports that grounded strength because it governs the systems that allow your muscles to actually do what they were designed to do. Now here's the wake-up call. Most people, especially adults over 50, are getting far less than the recommended 4,700 milligrams of potassium per day. Often they're getting less than half. And it's not because they're lazy or careless. It's because potassium has been largely stripped out of modern diets. Processed foods, low vegetable intake, high sodium meals, these are all potassium killers. And even when we think we're eating healthy, we often don't realize how far short we're falling. You could eat a full day's worth of food and still be potassium deficient if you're not intentionally including the right foods. Let me be clear, this isn't about adding a banana to your breakfast and calling it a day. One banana has about 400 milligrams of potassium. That's not even 10% of what you need. To truly nourish your muscles, you need to prioritize potassium-dense foods like leafy greens, avocados, wild salmon, squash, white beans, and even coconut water. These foods don't just fill your stomach, they send a signal to your cells, we're ready to grow again. And when that signal is consistent, the results start to become visible, not just in your strength or stamina, but in how you feel at a foundational level. Your energy improves, you recover faster, you stop feeling like you're pushing against your biology. Instead, you begin to work with it. This is also where the deeper psychological impact begins to unfold. Because when you give your body what it needs and responds with strength, the message you internalize is powerful. I'm not broken, I'm not done, I can still rebuild. That shift in belief, that moment when you stop seeing aging as loss and start seeing it as transformation, is where true wellness begins. So if you've been doing the workouts, drinking the shakes, and still feel like your body isn't cooperating, take a step back and ask a deeper question. Not how much protein am I eating, but rather, does my body have what it needs to actually use it? Because the answer to rebuilding your strength isn't always more. Sometimes it's smarter. Sometimes it's simpler. And sometimes it starts with a single overlooked mineral. But strength doesn't start in the gym. It starts in the cell. Feed the cell what it needs and the muscle will follow. Now that we've reframed potassium as the true key to rebuilding muscle after 50, not protein, the next layer we have to confront is this. Most people are deficient in it, and they don't even know it. And when I say most people, I'm not exaggerating. According to national surveys, over 98% of Americans don't meet the recommended daily intake of potassium. This isn't just a small oversight, it's a silent epidemic. And the consequences are showing up in ways we've normalized: fatigue, muscle cramps, weakness, poor recovery after workouts, and yes, gradual, steady muscle loss that no amount of protein powder can fix. This is where the conversation shifts from personal nutrition to cultural conditioning. Because here's the truth, our diets today are not designed for cellular health. They're designed for convenience, profit, and addiction. Processed foods dominate the modern plate, and even when we think we're eating healthy, there's a good chance we're still falling short on essential micronutrients like potassium. Why? Because potassium isn't in the foods that make it to the top of the pyramid anymore. It's not in the shiny packaging. It's not in the fast grab-and-go options. And yet, it's exactly what your body is silently begging for as you age. And the irony is, potassium isn't rare, it's abundant in nature. You'll find it in spinach, sweet potatoes, avocados, salmon, beets, coconut water, beans, and squash. These aren't exotic ingredients, they're whole natural foods. But most people don't consume them in high enough quantities to meet even the minimum threshold. Why? Because the modern American diet is high in sodium and low in potassium, and that ratio throws the entire body out of balance. Sodium retains water. Potassium helps move water into cells. Sodium contracts blood vessels. Potassium relaxes them. And in muscle tissue, potassium's job is absolutely vital. It's what allows electrical impulses to fire properly, triggering contraction and supporting recovery. Now imagine trying to rebuild muscle in your 50s or 60s with a chronic potassium deficiency. It's like trying to light a fire with wet matches. You can stack all the logs you want, protein, exercise, motivation, but without that spark, nothing catches. Your body wants to rebuild. It's designed for renewal, even into advanced age, but you've got to give it the tools to do its job. There's another reason this deficiency is so overlooked. There are no obvious symptoms until there are. Potassium deficiency doesn't scream for attention right away. It whispers. You feel a little more tired, a little less steady. Maybe you can't recover as quickly from a workout. Maybe your blood pressure starts creeping up. Maybe you wake up with muscle cramps and chalk it up to aging. But what's really happening is the slow erosion of your cellular integrity. The foundation is weakening, brick by brick. And the scariest part is you can be eating enough and still be malnourished. Because our food system is calorie rich and nutrient poor. That's why this isn't just a physical issue, it's a philosophical one. What does it mean to nourish ourselves? What does it mean to eat for life, not just for flavor or fullness? Reaching for foods rich in potassium isn't just about checking off a nutritional box. It's about reconnecting with your body's intelligence. It's about remembering that every bite is either a vote for regeneration or decline. And once you become aware of how common this deficiency is, you start seeing it everywhere. You see it in the older man who's lost his stride, blaming age. You see it in the woman who's lost her strength, despite clean eating and regular workouts. You see it in the widespread normalization of muscle loss and frailty as just part of getting older. But it's not. Much of it is correctable, and it starts with awareness. I often tell people, if you change nothing else in your life but started eating 7 to 10 cups of vegetables per day, mostly greens, cruciferous types, potassium-rich varieties, you would notice a shift in your energy, your strength, your recovery, and your mood within weeks. That's not marketing. That's biochemistry. Your cells are waiting to be recharged. And yes, in some cases, supplementation may be helpful, especially if you're taking medications like diuretics or certain blood pressure drugs that deplete potassium. But supplementation is a tool, not a crutch. The foundation must come from food, from nature, from the kind of nourishment that's woven into the human design. Here's what I want you to take from this. The muscle loss you've been blaming on time may actually be a call for nutrients your body hasn't received in decades. Don't ignore that call. Because the body is resilient. It remembers how to heal. It just needs the right message. Potassium is that message. If you want strength to return, start by feeding the systems that build it. And that starts with what's been missing all along. When we talk about strength after 50, it's easy to think only in terms of muscles. Biceps, quads, core, the visible markers of fitness. But real strength, the kind that lasts, the kind that carries you through decades of aging with vitality and presence, that kind of strength begins deep inside the cell and even deeper inside the fluid balance of your body. And this is where potassium plays a role that most people never even consider. Because potassium isn't just a mineral, it's a gatekeeper. It decides what gets into your cells and what gets out. And that gatekeeping process is what determines how well your muscles function, not just when you're lifting weights, but when you're simply living your life. Every single muscle contraction you've ever made, from lifting a bag of groceries to climbing a staircase, has relied on a precise exchange of sodium and potassium across the cell membrane. That exchange creates an electrical charge, a spark that makes movement possible. But here's the crucial part. Potassium doesn't just trigger the movement, it sustains it. It keeps the muscles hydrated at the cellular level, allows for efficient energy production, and supports fast recovery. When potassium levels are low, that entire system starts to fail, not in a dramatic way, but subtly, slowly. And that's why most people don't notice the loss until it's well underway. So let's look a little deeper into the role of intracellular hydration, a concept that doesn't get nearly enough attention. See, hydration isn't just about drinking more water. It's about where that water goes. And if your body is low in potassium, most of that water stays outside the cells. You can drink all the water you want, but if it's not being pulled into the cells where it's needed, you'll still feel sluggish, weak, even dehydrated. Potassium creates the osmotic pull that brings water inside the cells, where it can actually fuel metabolism, support enzyme reactions, and help rebuild tissue. Think of your muscle cells like balloons. When they're full of water and nutrients, they're taut, strong, responsive. When they're depleted, they deflate, they lose tone. And this is something we see constantly in people over 50. The loss of tone isn't just due to aging, it's due to underhydrated, undernourished cells. The muscle is still there, but it's not operating at full capacity. It's like trying to run a high-performance engine on watered-down fuel. Now here's the part that really shifts our perspective. Cellular hydration isn't just physical, it's emotional. The body stores stress. When we're depleted, when we're not giving ourselves what we need on a biochemical level, that stress becomes embedded. It shows up in our posture, our energy, even our confidence. You see a man or woman in their 60s who moves with power and fluidity, and you know there's something different happening inside their system. That's not just willpower or genetics. That's a well-supplied cellular environment. That's potassium doing its job behind the scenes. And on a deeper level, isn't that what we all want? Not just to look stronger, but to feel like our bodies are on our side again. To feel like we have access to energy, that we're not dragging ourselves through the day. That's what potassium offers. It's not about creating superhuman strength. It's about restoring biological cooperation. Your cells want to function, they want to rebuild, but they need the raw materials. They need the water, the charge, the signal that says, we're safe, we're supported, let's grow. There's also a fascinating link between intracellular hydration and inflammation. When cells are dry, they become inflamed. When they're hydrated, they're more resilient, they recover faster, they resist damage. And if we look at the big picture of aging, we know chronic inflammation is one of the leading drivers of disease, decline, and dysfunction. By optimizing potassium intake, we're not just supporting muscles, we're actively working against the mechanisms that speed up aging. That's a game changer. And this is where we have to get honest with ourselves. If we know potassium improves intracellular hydration, enhances muscle responsiveness, reduces inflammation, and helps retain strength as we age, then why aren't we making it a priority? Why do we still default to protein shakes and ignore the mineral that allows that protein to be used? The answer, I think, is psychological. We've been conditioned to chase visible results, not foundational health. But health is built from the inside out. It's quiet, it's slow, it doesn't always give you an immediate mirror result, but it lasts. And once you feel the difference, once you wake up with energy, move without pain, recover with ease, you'll never want to go back to living in a body that's operating below its potential. So I'll leave you with this thought. You are not losing strength, you are losing hydration at the cellular level, and that is reversible. Restore the fluid, restore the function. Give your cells what they need, and your body will remember how to be strong. There's a concept in medicine that we don't talk about enough outside clinical circles, insulin resistance. Most people associate it with diabetes, maybe weight gain, maybe fatigue, but very few realize that it plays a massive, often invisible role in muscle loss after 50, and even fewer connected to the mineral we've been talking about all along, potassium. See, insulin is not just about sugar regulation, it's also a powerful anabolic hormone. It helps shuttle nutrients, especially amino acids, into your muscle cells so they can rebuild and repair. But when your body becomes resistant to insulin, meaning it doesn't respond to it the way it used to, that repair mechanism weakens. And here's where it gets more interesting. Potassium is a critical player in insulin sensitivity. In fact, low potassium levels are strongly associated with poor glucose control and reduced insulin effectiveness. So when potassium is low, insulin can't do its job well, and your body struggles to build or maintain muscle no matter how much protein you're eating or how hard you're working out. Now think about the average person over 50. Many are dealing with creeping blood sugar levels. Some are pre-diabetic and don't even know it. Others are on medications for high blood pressure or cholesterol that actually deplete potassium. The body becomes more resistant to insulin over time, not necessarily because of age itself, but because of cumulative nutrient deficiencies, lifestyle habits, and hormonal shifts that have gone unchecked for decades. So when someone says, I used to build muscle so easily, but now it just doesn't happen like it used to, the question isn't just, are you working hard enough? The question is your body still listening to insulin? And if the answer is no, then the next question must be, is potassium playing a role in that breakdown? Let's dig a little deeper into the biology here. Every cell in your body has insulin receptors, and those receptors rely on a delicate electrochemical environment to function properly. That environment is governed in large part by potassium. Without enough potassium, the cell membrane becomes less responsive. The insulin signal becomes muffled. Glucose doesn't get absorbed efficiently, and instead of fueling muscle repair and energy production, it gets stored as fat. It's not just a metabolic inconvenience, it's a physiological shift that favors decline over regeneration. And this is where the psychological dimension becomes really powerful, because once you understand that this isn't just about willpower or aging or lack of effort, something changes. You stop blaming yourself. you stop feeling defeated, you realize that your body has been trying to speak to you all along. It's not broken, it's imbalanced. And the moment you begin restoring that balance, everything shifts. This is why increasing potassium-rich foods is such a critical part of the equation, not just for muscle, but for your entire hormonal and metabolic ecosystem. When potassium levels are optimized, insulin sensitivity improves. Glucose gets used as fuel, not stored as fat. Protein gets synthesized more efficiently. Recovery becomes faster. You start to regain the physical momentum you thought was lost forever. But again, it's not just about the physical, it's about empowerment. When you restore insulin sensitivity through something as simple and natural as potassium intake, you regain access to energy, to mental clarity, to emotional resilience, because blood sugar and mood are intimately connected, because inflammation drops, because your sleep improves, and all of that feeds back into your ability to stay active, to build muscle, to feel strong, not just in body, but in spirit. I've seen it time and time again. Someone adds a few servings of high potassium foods into their day: spinach, salmon, avocado, white beans, coconut water. And within weeks, they feel the fog lift, their energy improves, they feel unstuck. And when they pair that with just a little movement, nothing extreme, just walking or light resistance, they start to rebuild, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. That's the real transformation. Because ultimately, what we're talking about here isn't just how to preserve muscle. We're talking about how to preserve autonomy, how to age without surrendering to the slow, silent drift toward weakness. And that begins not with trying harder, but with nourishing smarter. So if you felt like your body is fighting you, if you've been putting in the work but not seeing the results, ask yourself this: have I given my cells what they need to respond to insulin? Because insulin can still work for you. Your muscles can still grow. Your energy can still rise, but only if you restore the mineral that helps make all of that possible. You don't need to fight harder. You need to listen closer. Potassium may be the quiet ally your body's been waiting for all along. Now, here's where everything we've talked about comes full circle. Because the truth is, you can't out-supplement a lifestyle that's draining you. You can't patch up fatigue, muscle loss, or declining vitality with isolated efforts while ignoring the deeper structural needs of your body. Here's where the importance of daily potassium intake takes center stage. Not as a quick fix, but as a ritual of restoration. A form of daily communication with yourself that says, I'm here, I'm supporting you, let's rebuild. We live in a culture of extremes. Cut carbs, load protein, take this pill, drink that shake. But rebuilding muscle after 50 is not about extremes. It's about consistency and biological conversation. And potassium, perhaps more than any other mineral, requires that consistency. It isn't stored in large amounts in the body, which means your muscles, nerves, and cells rely on a steady daily intake to function at their best. When potassium intake drops off, it doesn't take long for the system to start lagging. Fatigue creeps in, muscle recovery slows, blood pressure rises suddenly, and strength begins to fade, almost imperceptibly at first. Then, all at once, it feels like everything's changed. But the shift was gradual, and so is the solution. You don't need to overhaul your entire life. What you need is intentional repetition, a daily practice of feeding your cells what they need to perform and regenerate. We've talked about how potassium improves insulin sensitivity, restores intracellular hydration, supports muscle contraction, and even balances sodium levels to reduce inflammation. But all of that only works if you show up for yourselves every single day. So what does that look like? It looks like starting your day with a smoothie packed with spinach, avocado, maybe a banana. It looks like choosing roasted sweet potatoes over processed bread. It looks like reaching for coconut water instead of soda or sports drinks. It looks like viewing food not just as fuel, but as a pharmacological tool, a form of self-care that speaks directly to your mitochondria, your hormones, your tissues. When you eat potassium-rich foods regularly, you're not just preventing deficiency, you're creating an internal climate where muscle can thrive. And here's something deeply important. How we feed ourselves is often a reflection of how we value ourselves. And that's not always easy to hear, but think about it. If your life is so rushed, so externally focused, that you can't take time to nourish your internal systems with something as basic and essential as a mineral, what message are you sending to your body, to your future self? This is where the psychological depth really matters. Rebuilding muscle after 50 isn't just about biology, it's about identity. Are you choosing to align with vitality, with strength, with regeneration, or are you unconsciously aligning with decline because society told you it's inevitable after a certain age? Are you participating in your health or simply reacting to your symptoms? The act of consistently consuming potassium-rich foods is a quiet form of rebellion. It's a refusal to accept the narrative that aging equals weakness. It's a statement that says, I will not hand over my strength to time without a fight. And that fight, paradoxically, doesn't look like struggle. It looks like grace. It looks like nourishing your body with intention, with rhythm, with commitment. And when you do this long enough, just a few weeks even, you begin to feel the shift. Your energy returns, your digestion improves, your cravings diminish, your sleep deepens, and perhaps most importantly, you feel more in control of your health because you are. You're no longer at the mercy of aging. You're partnering with it, guiding it, and influencing it every single day with the choices you make. Now, there's one more layer to this. Potassium doesn't work alone. It thrives in synergy with magnesium, with calcium, with sodium in proper balance. Which means once you begin the practice of intentional potassium intake, your body becomes more receptive to everything else you do for it. Exercise becomes more effective, stress management becomes easier, even medications for those who need them often work more efficiently when the nutrient landscape is restored. It's like tuning a piano. Once the pitch is right, every note sounds better. So here we are. We've come full circle from discovering that potassium, not protein, is the unsung hero of muscle health after 50 to understanding the biochemistry, the psychology, and now the daily discipline that sustains it. And if there's one takeaway I hope stays with you, it's this. Vitality is not accidental. It's built, meal by meal, choice by choice, through minerals that most people overlook, but your body never forgets.